From KGW News, this is Straight Talk with Laural Porter.
Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Laural Porter. We have a big race to watch in the May primary coming up in Multnomah County. The race for district attorney is a heated one and could be pivotal for the county. Current district attorney Mike Schmidt is being challenged by someone from his own office, senior deputy prosecutor Nathan Vasquez. Voters elected Schmidt in May of 2020. Running on a platform of criminal justice reform and promising to be a progressive prosecutor, Schmidt won outright in the primary with a whopping 77% of the vote. He took office as the pandemic was taking off, and so were the Portland protests. He has since been blamed for a rise in crime, open drug use on the streets, and a drop in prosecutions, something he denies, and you can watch my interview with DA Schmidt on the KGW YouTube channel. His challenger, Nathan Vasquez, has promised to beef up enforcement of low-level crimes, make Portland's streets safer, and rebuild the partnership with law enforcement. Vasquez is a career prosecutor and has worked in the DA's office since he graduated from Lewis and Clark Law School in 2001. And he's handled thousands of cases, from misdemeanor trespass to aggravated homicide. In this episode of Straight Talk, Vasquez joins us to make his case to voters why they should elect him as the next Multnomah County District Attorney. Welcome to my guest, Multnomah County Senior Deputy Prosecutor Nathan Vasquez. Welcome to Straight Talk. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Well, thank you, Laural. It's a pleasure to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Well, let's get to know you just a little bit better and let our viewers know what it is that you do in the DA's office now. What is your role?
Yeah, I've been with the DA's office since 2000, actually. I started as an intern, and for the past now 24 years, I've worked in just about every kind of capacity you can imagine. But currently, I run our Strategic Prosecution and Services Unit, and we focus on what we call high-volume offenders and individuals. And so with that, I take on some of the most complex cases in our community, and in addition to that, I have a full case of homicides, and I work on those, quite a bit.
What is the biggest case that you've handled?
That's tough to say, because like I said, probably for over a decade now I've been handling homicides. Certainly I did the Normandale Park case, in which that was a mass shooting case that I prosecuted. This past year alone, I handled 2 murder in the first degree trials. One was a double homicide where the victim that I responded to was Nicole Griffin, and was a very sad and tragic case. And then, right after that, on the heels of that, I handled a triple homicide that happened over on 122nd. So it's been a busy time, and like I've said, it's hard for me to pin down because I've handled so many different, wide range of really complex cases. You are running against your boss in this race. Yeah. What is your biggest criticism of Mike Schmidt as district attorney? Well, if we talk about the biggest, it is about failed policies and failed leadership. He has been, a huge proponent of Measure 110, and I think that really kind of is the cornerstone of his policies, and it's been a huge, tragic failure for our community. And when we look at that, we can also kind of come from there and see how his leadership has failed within our office as well. As we've seen lots of prosecutors leave, and we've seen really 3 different gender discrimination claims, and it makes for a very difficult working environment. And furthermore, it's just a situation where our community has become less safe under Mike Schmidt. How would you compare your experience to Schmidt's experience? Yeah, my experience is really from an absolute ground-up perspective. Having started as an intern and then worked for 24 years, I've had an opportunity to work in all facets of the district attorney's office, and really that has brought me out throughout the community. Whether it's building community coalitions out in Rockwood or in North Portland, I've really had an opportunity to do it all. And the most poignant difference is that I've handled those very serious, complex cases where it's really ingrained in me that I value victims and this community first. And on the other side, quite frankly, Schmidt has just never done that work. He's never handled a homicide case. He's never done a robbery trial. He's never done a rape trial or any really serious felony case. And it shows in what we're seeing out in our community today.
You and others have criticized the DA for not prosecuting enough. What do you base that on?
Well, I mean, it's 20 years of experience and seeing what we have done in the past, what's worked and what hasn't, and certainly seeing what hasn't been working currently. And, prior to Schmidt taking office, we were prosecuting anywhere from 20,000 down to, I'd say, a low of about 12,000 cases. But under Mike Schmidt, and, he was very clear when he took office. He wanted to reduce prosecutions. His budgets he presented to the county commissioners specifically called for a reduction of felony property crimes. And so now we, under Mike Schmidt, have seen us prosecuting as few as maybe 6,000 cases. And, it's not, I think, the experience that our community is having on an everyday basis. As we go out and talk to folks, they don't feel safe. And certainly they don't feel 50% safer under Mike Schmidt.
I asked him when he was on the show in September about that criticism that he doesn't prosecute enough. And he disagreed with that and said that there's a lot of misinformation out there. And it started when he took office. So let's listen to what he said in September, and I'll get your response.
I mean, Donald Trump was talking about me in speeches, and that messaging, I think, broke through that, oh, that means we're not prosecuting anything. Not true. Our prosecution rates in our office are now higher than what my predecessors were. So we're doing the work. There's misinformation out there.
So you think you're prosecuting enough?
Oh, I do. And I think what a lot of folks maybe don't understand, and it's a system, it's a complex system. I can only prosecute cases where police officers make an arrest and have evidence. So we get those cases from them. They're kind of the pitchers, we're the catchers. We take those cases, and what I track is the percentage of the cases they're sending us. What percentage are we prosecuting? And that number has been going up consistently since I started, and now we're at a higher point than when my predecessor held this office.
So Nathan, do you disagree with that? Is there some truth to what he's saying?
I do disagree with that. I think when we look for a leader, particularly in the district attorney's office, we certainly want to look at what the results are. And if you really listen to what he says, he tries to key in and really mislead by saying it's the rate. And it's not what really matters to the everyday victim, to the everyday community member, their experience, which is it's the amount of crime and it's the amount of cases. And quite frankly, under Mike Schmidt, it has drastically dropped. It's for a variety of reasons, but that falls back on him very clearly.
Well, let's talk about the crime rate. Over the last few years, we have seen a record number of homicides, but Portland saw a drop in homicides and shootings in 2023 from 73 in 2023. That was down from 95 in 2022. And stats show overall crime in general is down, prompting Mayor Wheeler to say we're trending in the right direction. Are you encouraged by that? Should we be hopeful?
I think there are some issues with some of those stats, and I really want to point us back to where we are right at this moment in time and what the community is feeling, and are they feeling safe? When we talk about that one stat, homicide rates, I want to point out that here we sit in March of 2024, and since January we've had 16 homicides. And during my career we had years where an entire year we only had 16 homicides. And under Mike Schmidt, we've had record years, year after year, and this is not normal, and it's not okay. It's not a situation where we should be happy that we only had 85 homicides. When you look at this year alone, where we are the leading city on the entire West Coast for homicides. That includes San Diego, Seattle, San Francisco. You can take all three of those cities combined and they do not have as many homicides as Portland, Oregon. And that's a sad statement.
So what would you do if you were DA to bring down that number?
Well, first and foremost, it starts with basic accountability. Yes, I'm a firm believer in compassion, but we have to bring back accountability. And then you have to work from top to bottom, and that means working with our communities, being out in the community, whether it's through organizations like the Community Peace Collaborative, all the way up with the U.S. Attorney's Office to actually lean in and confront gun violence and have the experience and the leadership to really start to break those cycles of violence that we're seeing in our community right now.
You mentioned earlier Measure 110. It is a really hot topic, a controversial one. So let's dig into that a little bit. That is the voter-approved measure that decriminalized possession of small amounts of hard drugs, including fentanyl. And it's something that the legislature took up because people are so upset about it. And the House and Senate, Oregon House and Senate, passed a compromise measure, House Bill 4002. We're taping this Thursday afternoon, and as of now, I haven't heard an announcement that the governor has signed that bill yet, so we're waiting on that. But let's talk a little bit about what's in that compromise bill, and then I'll get your reaction to it. It would make simple drug possession something new, called an unclassified misdemeanor. Someone convicted of the crime would initially get probation, up to 18 months instead of serving jail time. If they violate probation, they could get 30 days in jail. And for a more serious violation, the court could revoke their probation, and the person could get a 6-month jail sentence. And a person could get early release to attend either inpatient or outpatient treatment. And then there's this key piece of the bill that is optional for county prosecutors and law enforcement agencies to adopt. Drug possession would be handled outside the courts, and instead the offender would go into a deflection program and be referred to treatment. As a potential future district attorney, do you support this compromise measure? Does it go far enough?
Well, let me start and say that, Measure 110 was the failed experiment of Mike Schmidt. This was something that he really pushed hard on, and he wanted to see brought forward to Oregonians. And he took a lot of money from outside special interests to really see that come into our community, and it has not served us well. It has failed us in many ways, and it's failed the everyday person struggling with addiction. Throughout this, I have said that it doesn't serve our community, and what I've been very clear about is that we need to be engaged with the everyday person that's struggling with addiction, and engaged with our community. What I put forward was a 6-point plan that people can go to my website and read, and a lot of what's in my plan, thankfully, the legislature did incorporate, and I do support that. I am certainly calling for and asking for more support for our community and for those struggling for addiction. In particular, right now we don't have a sobering center. It's something that we desperately need. I've been advocating for it.
I think we're working on that. We may have one soon.
But it's been years, and it's something that this community has desperately needed, and it's a tool that is important for, again, that person that's struggling for addiction, and it's a tool for law enforcement, because I want to see individuals that are struggling get the help they need.
Would you adopt this deflection program?
Absolutely. As part of my plan, it is a strong emphasis on how do we connect people with treatment, how do we get people engaged in treatment, and really how do we put the support network around them so that they're successful ultimately. And that's been what I've pushed for from day one. And unlike that failed experiment of Measure 110, I'm someone that believes you have to engage. You have to really, dig in with individuals that are struggling if we want to see something better for our community as a whole.
There were a lot of groups who opposed this compromise measure, and they protested in Salem. They say that the law will disproportionately impact people of color. If you're DA, what would you do to make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, one of the great things about having over 2 decades of experience is that I've had the opportunity to build up what we call the Strategic Prosecution and Services Unit. It's something where we use data to carefully monitor things like this. And as the elected DA, of course, I'm going to be looking at how do we approach this in a way that is not going to disproportionately impact communities of color, and also look at, are we doing what's in the best interest of those individuals that are struggling and the community? Because we really have to find a way to end open air drug use, but also help individuals that are struggling with addiction.
Let's talk about some of your endorsement. 6 local law enforcement and firefighters unions have endorsed you, including the powerful union, the Portland Police Association, which at one point you had called a hot potato because of the skepticism that some viewers have and some citizens of the union and law enforcement. How do you feel about that endorsement now, and what do you want our viewers to know about your relationship with law enforcement and the union?
Yeah, I am very proud of those endorsements, and it's actually more than that now. There's been other law enforcement agencies and first responders that have endorsed me, including, of course, Portland Fire and Gresham Fire as well. And what I want to say is that I absolutely recognize that there are groups and individuals within our community that do have a distrust of the police. And what I believe that a good leader should do is create a partnership and create a bridge between those individuals. Under Schmidt, quite frankly, he tried to pick sides, and he broke the partnership with law enforcement, and it created this huge gap, and it really pushed us backwards. I'm looking to move us forward and to build that bridge between various groups within our community and our first responders so that we can all move forward into a community where we feel safer.
When you look at the support that DA Schmidt had in 2020, he won with 77% of the vote, as I mentioned, it would indicate a lot of people did support, and probably some still do support, criminal justice reform. What is your philosophy if you're elected DA when it comes to criminal justice reform?
I've always been a huge proponent of being both compassionate but also having accountability. And when we talk about being progressive and reform, the way that we can do that is we can always look for good, clear pathways to avoid prison when we can, and look at how do we give people the life skills, the treatment, whether it's mental health or drug addiction services, to really put them in a place where hopefully they'll be out of the system, because that's what we really all want. Is we want to see a healthy community where even those individuals that have committed crimes, we need to hold them accountable, but we also need to look at how in the long term can we get them to a place where they're going to be productive and healthy in society? And absolutely, reform of the system is a cornerstone of what I believe in and what I've worked for, particularly in the last 5 years.
Would you support and continue the new treatment court called the STEP court that Schmidt says has reduced recidivism, the number of people that go back to prison, to 10% for those who go through that program? That's the STEP court.
I would support the STEP court. I would make some very specific changes because there are some very violent crimes that are put into that court that I don't think are appropriate. But as a whole, yes, I absolutely support that. And really, kind of throughout the process, what I've said is I really support bringing back our community court system and our drug courts, because really, when you want to talk about progressive reforms and progressive ways, those are where you have the greatest opportunity to be both compassionate and hold people accountable. And sadly, under Schmidt, those went away. And there's really been little to no efforts to bring those back. And those can be a cornerstone to how we get back to that safe and healthy community.
So you want to bring back the community court system. How about the Justice Integrity Unit that works on getting, or unit that works on getting old convictions right? Will you continue that?
Again, there are some very particular areas that are going to need to be looked at very carefully. Yes, absolutely. With expungements, I support that because I want people who have paid their debt to society to get back to where they can be healthy, productive members of our community. However, I can tell you that there were some issues with the commutations that Schmidt pushed forward in 2023 that came out of the JIU that were deeply troubling and concerning, where I don't believe that victims' families were respected and valued in the way that they should be. And we saw some really shocking results where people that were convicted of very heinous aggravated murder crimes, Schmidt supported really seeing them released.
Nathan, it's time for us to take a break. When we come back, more with candidate for Multnomah County District Attorney Nathan Vasquez and his vision for Portland and Multnomah County and how we get there. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to Straight Talk. I'm Laural Porter. We're talking with candidate for Multnomah County District Attorney Nathan Vasquez. He is the only candidate running against current DA Mike Schmidt, who was elected in 2020. Since there are only 2 candidates, it's likely one of them will win outright in the May primary coming up Tuesday, May 21st. And a reminder, DA Schmidt was my guest here on Straight Talk last September. If you'd like to hear what he has to say, check out our conversation on the KGW YouTube channel. Welcome once again to my guest, Schmidt's opponent, Multnomah County Senior Deputy Prosecutor Nathan Vasquez. Once again, nice to have you here.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, a really important topic is cash bail. Senate Bill 48 was passed in 2021. It was supported by DA Schmidt and eliminated mandatory cash bail levels for certain crimes. And in supporting that, Schmidt said how much money a person has should not dictate whether or not they're released. Instead, the law now requires individual assessments conducted by pretrial release officers when making decisions about bail. Now, you did not support that change. Why not?
Well, I think the overall concept, it is correct. It is the way that that Schmidt put it together and brought this to us that has been a complete failure. What happened was you had someone who, quite frankly, lacks the experience of working through cases and really being able to evaluate, what is necessary to really help and protect victims in the community. And so what we've seen, sadly, is a revolving door in the front of the jail, where we have people that are arrested, 8, 9 times. And just about a week ago, I had to deal with a case in which a drug dealer was on his 9th arrest with a gun downtown dealing fentanyl. And that can't be normal, and that can't be acceptable. And it is a situation where, I stepped in, I worked with the U.S. Attorney's Office to make sure that individual was held, because really this community deserves to be safe. And that is just one example of many where we're seeing this occur over and over from a broken system that Mike Schmidt put together without really the experience necessary to know how to deliver it.
Would you advocate for a change in that cash bail system in the next legislative session?
Absolutely, and I am really saddened that he didn't advocate for a change in this one that we're in right now, because these are real issues that real victims are dealing with as we speak, and it needs to be adjusted in a way that the courts can actually take into account that when someone commits a crime, and I know this sounds very basic, but sadly Schmidt missed this, that when someone commits a crime while they're on release for another crime, that the court should be able to take that into account and should be holding people in custody when they're out of control and they're repeatedly victimizing the community and the victims in our community. Let's
talk a little bit more about you personally. You were a Republican up until 2017, and then you switched your affiliation to independent. Why?
Yeah, for most all of my adult life, I have been a career prosecutor, and it's something that I have worked so hard at and really have taken a lot of pride in. But then, 2016 came along and the rise of Donald Trump, and quite frankly, I was disgusted by that. And I was disgusted by what he stood for, the things he said and did. And it caused me to really step back and say, do I want to be associated at all with that? And I reflected on my personal values, and particularly with the Republican Party, I saw some massive differences that it really no longer reflected who I saw myself as. And so I chose specifically to be an independent. And then for me, that was really important as a career prosecutor to be independent, because in my role and in my life, I believe that I'm doing my best job when I am applying the facts to the law in a very even-handed way. And it's something that, I'm proud to say I have many examples of that, particularly when it comes to cases with political violence. This is an area where I have really taken on some very complex cases. I've prosecuted Proud Boys when they've come and terrorized the citizens in our community successfully. And on the other side of the coin, when Antifa extremists have come and, terrorized our community, lit fires, smashed out the windows to the Oregon Historical Society, I went to great lengths to prosecute those individuals and to make sure that they were held accountable as well. Because I'm a firm believer that we need to take the politics out of this job and really get back to the business of doing prosecution.
Put you on the spot. How do you think you'll vote in this presidential election?
I certainly won't be voting for Donald Trump. I'll be voting for Joe Biden.
So let me ask you about your vision for Portland. We have about a minute and a half left total. In a nutshell, what is your vision for Multnomah County and Portland?
I am someone that loves and is deeply committed to our community and to Multnomah County. I've dedicated my career to this community. I raised my children here. I live in Southwest Portland. And what I see is that in the past few years, we've become less safe under Mike Schmidt. And what I want to do is clearly see an end to the open-air drug use, reduce the wildly out-of-control violent crime that we're dealing with on a day-in, day-out basis. And I want to overall kind of end the disorder and chaos that we're seeing in our streets. And that comes from the gun violence all the way down to the unchecked graffiti. And I know and I believe that can occur. And this is a situation where I see a lot of opportunity and a lot of hope. And I know that if we select a leader with the experience and the knowledge to get this done, I really believe that we can move to a better place, a safe community where our families feel safe to go to parks, to come downtown, to explore all the vibrant neighborhoods of our wonderful community. And I know that we can get there. We just need the right leaders.
Nathan Vasquez, thank you so much for joining us here on Straight Talk. We really appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
And we want to let you know that KGW is hosting a debate between Mr. Vasquez and the current DA, Mike Schmidt. That's coming up on Thursday, May 2nd at 6:30 p.m. We hope you'll join us then. Thank you for watching Straight Talk. Remember, you can get us as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. I'll see you next week for Straight Talk.